So this is a very unspiritual message.
Donc c'est un message qui n'est pas du tout spirituel.
Because what it says is there is no illusion.
Ce qu'il dit, c'est qu'il n'y a pas d'illusion.
There is nothing to wake up from.
Il n'y a rien, il y a rien où il faut pas il y a
There's
rien à se réveiller.
There's nothing to gain.
Il n'y a rien à obtenir.
There's nothing to lose.
Il n'y a rien à perdre.
There is no additional realization.
Il n'y a pas de réalisation additionnelle.
To sitting in a room.
À être assis dans une pièce.
And thoughts and feelings.
Les pensées, les émotions.
Chairs.
Les chaises.
And the room.
La pièce.
There's nothing else to get.
Il n'y a rien d'autre à obtenir.
Or
everything and no thing is inseparably so and not so ad infinitum. The absolute is everything and no thing, inseparably so and not so ad infinitum. Nothing is singled out. Nothing is significantly better than anything else. There is not one single thing better or worse than something else. There is no separation. What's looking is what's is thought to be sought, to by, for, from, about, with, to by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around that which believes and thinks that it is separate. It is significantly so, exclusively so. It's permanently real. It had a beginning and will have an end. It believes that. It is learned to believe that. It is learned to think about itself as a single person, as an individual person, as a self-conjured self. The conjured self has taken the idea of individuality and believes that in every other idea and concept that supports individuality, that is self-identification with the self-conjured self. The conjured self conjures up ideas, thoughts, beliefs, imaginings, cognitions, that it is separate, terminally unique, to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around other individuals. Everything and no thing, inseparably so and not so, are appearances. They are appearances of energy forms, innumerable energy forms, from energy fields that are out of nowhere, from nothing. These innumerable energy forms have no parameters, have no boundaries. They are included with everything that can be visibly observable in mirrors, and also that which is not visibly observable. That which is real and unreal, observable and unobservable, knowable and unknowable, all at the same time. Absolutely everything and no thing that is inseparably so and not so is always, in all spaces and times throughout the infinite universe. Everything is appearing as though it is everything, and within everything there is anything that can appear, and within that anything that can appear there's something that seemingly appears. That which seemingly appears is thought to be separate from something else. It was learned to seemingly be that way. But not to be whereby I know that I'm being and that I can do something about how I'm being, how and why I'm being. The self-conjured self has learned to self-identify with itself to such a degree that it believes it needs to describe, and it needs to find and locate meaning, reason, and purpose to support that it is an individual, to support the idea of individuality and permanence, and that it matters 2 by 4 from, about, with, upon, and around itself. The self-conjured self continuously conjures meaning, reason, and purpose 2 by 4 from, about, with, upon, and around itself. It does not know any other way to think about itself. It does not believe that it is part. It does not believe that it is part of absolutely everything that appears. It does not believe that it is. It does not believe that it is not a separate appearance of something. It believes that it is a permanent, separate appearance of a body-mind action figure that's real, had a beginning when it was born, and that it will have an end when it dies. If it is to learn and then believe in what it learns, then that which it believes, that which the self-conjured self believes and has learned, becomes a way of life. Because it believes in what it knows and does matters. 2 by 4 from, about, with, upon, and around itself. This is the manner by which the self-conjured self justifies its own terminal uniqueness, justifies its individuality. It justifies its own body that it believes is its own by finding meaning, reason, and purpose. And then it believes that it has support from all others that agree. There is an agreement that's conjured. The agreement that's conjured is that every newborn body-mind action figure that happens to be humanly corporeal, the human form, that it has learned it is a human form. Everything that it has learned, it believes, and everything that it believes that it knows that, and that it knows everything that it believes 2 by 4 from, about, with, upon, and around itself. And that each human corporeal appearance is an individual person. And that each of these people, each person, self-identifies with a birth name and birthright. Subconscious self believes that it needs to label, define, categorize, names. It needs to come up with names to identify the things that it believes it sees. It believes that it envisions that everything that's visibly observable, 2x4 from about, with, upon, and around itself, is filled with individual things that can be identified and separated and categorized. It sees everything before itself as separate. It self-identifies with other objects and thinks that I have, or I possess, or I own my very own body-mind. It's my body, it's my mind to do with what I please. I'm going to take care of it because I know it's mine. I'm going to do the best I can to take care of my own body-mind because I believe it is my own. I believe that because it was taught to me. To me, I am an individual me, person, self, a you. So there's you and me. I'm a me, and you're a me as well. But I'm calling you, you. I'm using that pronoun because that justifies that you're an individual, just as I am. You're an individual. And that you're permanently real, you're observable in mirrors, so that proves that you are an individual person because you can look into a mirror and see your own body there. That's what was learned. But is that true? Is that exclusively real? Is that exclusively so that way as it is thought to be? Is it truly thought to be this way? This way that was taught to the body-mind action figure? Somehow, there is a collapse. Somehow, there is a recognition. It is not known exactly how it happens, but it is knowable to discuss what we are not. Although we are not a collective we, it just apparently appears as though, based on the visual field, based on what is witnessed and seen and observed, based on the identifications, the definitions, based on the subject matter, the objectivity of objects, the subjectivity of subjects, that to know that I am is subjectifying that I am an individual person. Then to objectify that I have my own body mind is to gaze into a mirror and say objectively, that's my body mind. I'm seeing a reflection in the mirror, 2x4 from about, with, upon, and around myself. Either I believe that's true or not. I believe it is true because it is agreed by a majority of those I know. Others, family members. I call them family because that's what I've learned to call them. Parents. I've learned in the English, using the English language, I've learned 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around myself, that I'm an individual person, that I'm special, I'm unique, I have my own birth name, birthright that was given to me. And I was told that this is the way everything is. That everything we learn, we're learning for the common good. And the common good is to be a good person, do not harm anyone else. And if I wish to adopt a belief in that even stronger, then these advisements or these ideas that were taught to me and that I picked up and learned along the way, to adopt the idea that there's meaning, reason, and purpose in life. And the degree by which I'm special and unique is that there's a place in the universe 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around everybody, every human being, and that includes the animals as well. All other life forms, they do not appear to be as significant. Then there are those beliefs, other beliefs that are referred to as religions. Religions, teachings, spiritual teachings. Spiritual in the sense that the aliveness that each individual self-conjured conjured self is conjured. The conjuring is shared. The conjuring is learned. The conjuring is taught. 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around all human corporeal appearances, as though each human corporeal appearance is an individual separate entity that exists independently, 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around itself. That there is my body, my life. My beginning is when I was born, my end will be when I die. And that everything I do matters. Everything you do matters. Everything that was done in the past. Your story of your past, everything you did, that all mattered. And that everything you did and I did, as my life and your life, you have your story of your life and I have my story of my life. This is what we know. This is what we've learned. We are we because we appear humanly corporeal. We share very similar appearances. Therefore, this was learned. This idea that we are a we, and this is us, and that we live upon a planet. We live upon a planet that harbors innumerable life forms. All these innumerable life forms cannot be counted and separated by categorizing them all, because the countenance is too great. Therefore, the self-conjured conjured self, in agreement, will speak of that which can be spoken of. In other words, if we have learned to call something that is seen out in the shared reality that we believe is a shared reality, then that is what is discussed. That's what's talked about. But there comes a time, in space and time, that this all began. This all began 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around an individual body mind that was born, a human corporeal body mind that was born. But all appearances of something are simply energy fields. They're energetic movements of energy fields that have frequencies of resonance, and they manifest a manifestation as some type of energy form. And all the innumerable energy forms are immeasurable. Therefore, that which is believed to be seen as though it is separate, the countenance is too great to believe that everything is permanently so when it is not. The belief that everything is permanently so is a mistaken take. It's a misinterpretation. If existence is to be discussed among body-mind action figures that are simply expressing as body-mind action figures, it is believed that each body-mind action figure contains its own individual person or a self. That each human corporeal body-mind has learned this, that there's a self there. And when it is thought to be there is your here, and this there is my here. And so it was never questioned. It was simply spoken in the language of separation. All languages that are spoken speak of that which is thought to be permanently so, or exclusively so, when it has never been that way. Everything that was thought to be a separate something, 2x4 from about, with, upon, and around somebody, was thought to have a particular time that it will appear. It will continue to appear permanent, but after so much time going by, and then an indeterminate duration that goes by, a living creature, a living thing that is thought to be alive by its own accord and volition, because it has avoided dangers, it has avoided dangers of being killed, or it has made every effort to avoid dangers that it is aware of or that it is capable of avoiding, because it believed that there were dangers around it. The dangers were seemingly very real, and so it relied on its ability to observe that which apparently appears to be permanently so. Although it's also not so, although everything is impermanent, in other words, everything does not last forever in some permanent state. That which is thought about, that which is expressed via some language that is spoken 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around a human corporeal form, that's thought to be a separate person speaking a particular language, is not exclusively and permanently so. Nothing is exclusively so. No thing is and is not exclusively so, because it is also not exclusively so. It is and it is not. Everything and no thing is and is not inseparably so and not so, which includes everything that is always always. So even if the human corporeal body mind believes it is separate, and it is describing and making every effort to describe that which it believes it is witnessing within some type of reality or shared reality, it's not that way. It's not the way that is believed. 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around a body-mind action figure that believes it is separate. It is separate. It is separately and permanently so. It's of its own accord and volition. It has its own free will and choice to do with what it pleases with its very own body-mind action figure. But that is only seemingly so. It just apparently appears that way. It just apparently appears as though there are individual things, items. I guess let's learn that. And the support of learning that was provided by other self-conjured conjure selves. So at some point in space and time, if there were historical accounts that were recorded using a language to say that yes, in the past, this is the type of history, and this is the history as a story of the earth, and yet a story of the earth is not exclusively the way a story of the earth is presented or is stated or is shared among even a group of body, mind, action figures that believe they are uniquely separate groups in a societal structure. A societal structure is believed to be permanently so, filled with a countenance that's believed to be within billions, 7 or 8 billions, give or take 7 or 8 billion, permanent, exclusively so, permanent body, mind, action figures. Human bodies that have their very own special name, a birth name and a birthright. They each have a certificate of authenticity, so to speak. A certificate of authenticity as a birth certificate. And then the authenticity of the body, mind, action figure's death, it is provided with a birth certificate, just as it was provided a unique birth name and birthright that it believes it possesses and has, because it was told that it has that it was given a birth name and birthright, and that it will always be that birthright and birth name that was given. It will always be that, and it carries around and will have a special birth certificate that it can use as identification. Identification of a separate person. A separate person with its own life to live, its own free will and choice to decide, make decisions, 2 by 4 from about, with, upon, and around itself. And that's the way it is. And that's the way it has always been. And one need not question that, because one is a separate person. One is one that believes it is real. It has a life of its own to live, and it has a body, mind to live that life, to do and to know. It believes that what it does and what it knows is what it is. It believes that it is a person with its own ideas, own original thoughts, and that no other human corporeal body, mind, action figure, no other with some specific birth name and birthright, that those are others, and that I'm here. It also believes in fixed positions. It believes in fixed positions where a person or the conjured self can stand their own ground. It believes that, as an example, a subconscious conjured self will say, I am here in this chair, in my house, in my home. It is my home because I pay for the rent, or I purchased this house and it belongs to me. I signed my own signature on a document, on a deed, on the title of the home that I live in. Each of us possesses its own human corporeal body mind, because that was taught to us. We have learned that. And so we agree upon that because it seems to be the way that we were told. It seems to be the way that we learned that. And that how do we learn that? Through the mind of a body mind of our own. So in that terminal uniqueness, in that individuality, in that idea of separateness and self-identification with a body-mind action figure that is believed to be one's own, this was perpetuated. It began with the idea that I was born a separate person. A separate, very unique individual person, unlike anybody else on the entire planet. To include also all other Earth-like planets throughout the universe, if there are other Earth-like planets. And since a body-mind can also entertain ideas outside of what is construed as standard, fundamental ways of thinking, the imaginings of an imagination 2x4 from about, with, upon, and around, the mind of a body mind is believed to be one's own, and that mind can entertain thoughts that are believed to be original thoughts, and there, in that separation, there's the duality, all the dualism, all the duality that's conjured is believed. It is believed because that's information that can be known. It's information. The thoughts are always in some type of formation, and these formations are innumerable, simply because everything that's thought about as an idea is conjured, and although it's conjured 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around, an individual body-mind action figure that believes it is separate from other body-mind action figures. And it supports that individuality by conjuring the idea of separateness. It believes that it has continuously supported an intention to do so as well. That which is believed has been intentionally thought to be believed and entertained in some particular way, a particular way of life. And that a self-conjured self, a human, corporeal, body-mind action figure, that does not believe, that does not recognize that it is not separate from everything else, and that there is not an everything else. It believes it is separate from everything else because it thinks in terms of terminal uniqueness or individuality or independence, or that I exist as an individual body-mind, that this is my body, and so it has life, and the life that it has is also mine. Therefore, this body-mind is me. And the life force, in a spiritual sense, is what I am. I am that life force, but I'm also the body-mind that appears. In a sense, it seems to be that way. But to justify that, to proclaim that it is that way, it is permanently so, in some particular way, is not necessary. Because it is not particularly so. It is not permanently so. It is impermanently so. It's both. It's permanently so in space and time for a temporally temporary duration, for an indeterminate temporally temporary duration in space and time, because it is not of space and time as well. It is both appearing in space and time as a human corporeal form that is identified in some particular way. The identification, the self-identification of a self that is believed to be an individual person is conjured. That idea of independence and individuality, that terminal uniqueness, that is a very, very strong belief. And it is a very strong knowing that each human corporeal body mind believes they are sharing. And this is how it believes that life is a shared reality. And even if it calls it a dream, even if it hears that life is a dream, it calls that dream a shared dream. It's all a shared reality because it seems to be that way. It only apparently appears to be that way. So, nothing can be singled out, nothing can be isolated, nothing. Nothing is necessary to be taught. Therefore, it's unnecessary for there to be teachers. Life is not taught to be lived 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around a separate person that believes it can control its own life to live, that life can be controlled and directed, and that a body-mind action figure that is believed to be independently so, separate from everybody and everything else, can decide upon its own life that it believes it's living. The life forces of life are passing through like into a river flowing, rivering. So the life force is apparently appearing is what seemingly provides the precipitous of life to appear in some way. So life is appearing in some way 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around a subconscious self that believes it is separate from everybody and everything else, that it has its own life to live, it has its own body mind to use via accord of volition of its own, free will and choice of its own. It believes so strongly about that because the beliefs in the idea of separation and individuality, internal uniqueness, that it has been supported for so long in so many different ways that it has become self-convinced. It believes it's an individual self, and it is convinced that it is that it is a separate living entity, a very, very special, unique, separate entity in this shared reality, regardless if it's thought to be a dream, or just simply called a reality, a dimension to exist upon, a third-dimensional construct, a hologram. No matter what a type of shared reality is conjured up, no matter what idea is conjured 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around a self-conjured conjured self, and then there's groups of self-conjured conjured selves in agreement with various ideas of terminal uniqueness, of individuality. If it is heard and taught in some particular way, these concepts and these ideas of people, of individual people grouping together, if they are expressing in similar ways, they seek out others that are expressing in a similar manner as they are. So then it turns out to be believed that I am here, you are there. There are others that are in other fixed positions in space and time. Although they're not of space and time, and although each human corporeal appearance that appears as a human corporeal appearance is not existing, it is not appearing upon a fixed position in space and time. It only apparently appears to be that way. Just as a map is gazed upon, look at a flat surface, flat map, a paper map, even if it's a globe, there are fixed positions and coordinates, longitudinal and latitudinal marks. The mapping, the layout, there are cross points where meridians are. These the layout, and then there are ley lines on the cross patternings of longitudinal, latitudinal marks. And this patterning can be tracked and can be traced, and that each coordinate of a longitude and latitudinal mark on a map corresponds with a particular point upon the permanently physical geographical place that someone can be standing upon. That the mapping of the entire planet was mapped out in that particular way because nobody knows how far back these ideas of terminal uniqueness began. It was just simply agreed upon. And it was something learned. All the various concepts that were learned. Something is a concept, is learned, because there apparently appear to be places for each person to exist upon. And that a person can go from one place to another, and that wherever they are in time, then the time that they are upon a particular coordinate in space and time corresponds with the time that they are upon a particular coordinate. So these particulars, these specifics were conjured. These specifics were conjured to support the idea of meaning, reasons, and purpose. So, at some point, groups of self-conjured conjured selves in agreement within what is referred to as a societal structure all agreed that yes, we must form these schools where every newborn can eventually attend, and let's create these institutions, these academic institutions of learning, and then we can also structure them to support each year. And that each year that a person is developing within our societal structure, it will learn how to go out and learn how to exist and live in various environments on the earth. And so the self-conjured conjured self has learned everything that it believes it knows. It believes it knows what it knows because it has a mind of its own to support what it knows and to believe that. And then it can make up its own mind, because it believes it has its own mind that can choose what it believes to be true or what it believes to be untrue. It cannot be both. A self-conjured conjured self cannot believe that anything can be and not be. How can it be and how can it not be? How can everything that appears to be something, everything and nothing, how can that be inseparably so and not so at the same time? How can anything be so and not so? It doesn't make sense. So, the self-conjured conscious self believes it has to make a choice. To believe in everything as one particular way or some other particular way. But it can't be all ways that are thought to be, whereby the self-conjured conscious self is existing 2x4 from upon, with and around itself at all times. Now, it believes that it could entertain an idea upon a certain point, a coordinate in space and time, then it can record that, and then it becomes the past. It believes in a threefold principle because it learned that. And then how it learned it and why it learned it, and that concept or idea, whatever that might be, just simply to be, believes that you are and I am because we know we are. You know that you are, therefore You exist as a separate individual person because of what you know. And what you know, I may not know unless we share that. So, it can only be known if it is shared in some way. If it is spoken of, or taking the language and writing it down, writing a letter or writing some kind of a thesis, putting together some words to describe what is witnessed, what is seen, out in this shared reality, out in this world. And so if I'm here and I want to go there where you are, then I will travel. And I believe that I am traveling, because if I stand up in some particular place that is referred to as here, and I want to go over there. Now, funny thing is though, once I'm there, that becomes the next here. Well, how can that be? See? But the imagination may not stretch that far, or the curiosity, or the thoughts that are entertained in a body mind. Thoughts that are entertained in a body mind are believed to be one's own. So it conjures this idea of separation, of individuality. It conjures it. And what it has conjured, it has learned. But that does not make it permanently so, and not... It is not. Nothing's permanently so. But it is not questioned to that extent. It is simply accepted. So that which is accepted, 2 by 4 from about, 2 by 4 from about, with, upon, and around, that which is believed to be a separate person, conjures up the idea of separation to support that in some way, to come up with an explanation of meaning, reason, and purpose, that it believes it is being a particular way. It believes that it can be a particular way if it does certain things, if it performs particular actions, specific actions that become a process. And if those actions are followed through step by step, that's taught to a particular body mind attribute that believes it is separate, entirely unique, and it takes these concepts and ideas and these processes of doings, of activities, that if it does something, it's going to get a result. 2 by 4 from, about, with, upon, and around what it does. And if it does it right, or if it does it effectively enough, then it can become more refined, more of itself. But it wants to become a better version of itself, because that's what it's taught. It is taught to be always seeking to be better than you were before, or than it was before. It wants to be all it can be, because it believes in the becoming, of becoming greater, something greater that it could reach for. So it believes in a future. It could justify that it knows the past because it has memory of its own life that it lived. So this is how it justifies that it has its own body. It has its own body and mind to make choices. And this is where it gets the meaning, reason, purpose from. Is that I know. I know because I'm aware, and I could say that I know. I said, oh, I know what I'm talking about. So if I know what I'm talking about, that means that I can do something about that which I refer to, or that which I'm talking about. Some particular process, or some process of becoming more than I am. How did I become more than I am? Well, through the learning. Through the activity and the action and the process of learning. Learning what? Knowledge. What type of knowledge? Higher knowledge? Greater knowledge? Knowledge accessible to me now because I'm still becoming more of a better person. A better version of myself. How can I become a better version of myself? Well, I believe I can do that by that which I know. So I should seek as much information as I can that supports me, that supports myself to become a better person. See, it believes that. It believes in becoming a better person because it believes it's separate and that it needs to improve. That it needs to improve and needs to constantly work on that because it feels as though it is working against some type of force that's not necessarily intentionally preventing it from becoming a better version of itself, but that it believes there's these struggles and these doings, that it has to struggle in some particular way in order to become better than it is. And the struggle apparently appears to be amassing information and knowledge and taking that knowledge into its own mind and storing as much of that knowledge as it can that pertains to refinement, that pertains to becoming, that pertains to what I want to be in 5 years from now. So it's always thinking about the future because it wants to improve itself. It believes it has to do that. See, do. It believes that it is being through the doing. It is being via the doing of some actions. Some type of actions that support refinement and improvement. Self-improvement, if you will. There are self-help books and knowledge and information, but there's so many different types. Why and how there's so many different types? It's because of that. Because of that, you could call it a concept or an idea that everything is always always, but just because it is said via a particular body-mind action figure, does that make it true? Well, see, here is where the conundrum remains. Does everything have to either be true or not true? Does everything have to be permanently true or not true at all? There's the impermanence, and the impermanence, can truth be impermanent? Try it out. See, try out these ideas, and it does that, because it is seeking and understanding. The body-mind action figure that is born, that believes it is born, that had a beginning, and that it's introduced into what is thought to be a world out there, and that I am here, and I can be here in these particular positions that I call here, there, or somewhere else. I don't understand what it means to be everywhere. How can that be? But it is, and it is not. See, how can that be? Well, when you say, how can that be? Is that being permanently so? No, it's never permanently so. It's also impermanently so. But the permanence contains an indeterminate duration of temporal temporariness. Nothing is permanent. Everything is impermanent. But everything is permanent and impermanent at the same time, which is how it is so and not so. Which is how everything and nothing is inseparably so and not so. It's always, always, every way that can be conceived of and thought about and entertained. Is an idea of being something, but it's not being anything in particular. It is just thought that way. So there's the dilemma. The body-mind action figure is either self-identifying with itself because it believes it is that self that it self-identifies with. It believes it is that self-conscious conscious. It believes it is that birth name and birthright it was given exclusively. It believes it was permanently so, was permanently so, is permanently so, and will always be permanently so. But always be permanently so to the extent that it is still apparently appearing in mirrors, or that it could see its own reflection in a mirror. Once it can no longer seem to be doing that, then it has to accept the fact that then at that point it has died. And that death means no further reflections in mirrors, nothing else to do, and nothing else to know. But then there are those body, mind, action figures that entertain the idea that everything that was once considered unknowable will also become knowable, and that it will just be everything that is knowable. Everything and nothing, just separately so, not so, is knowable. 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around that which has died. Now, could it be that way just because it is mentioned and stated and said? Anything that's stated and said as though it's an idea, and of course everything that is stated is an idea, it's a concept, it's a subject to talk about. And there are objects and things, and behind those objects and things that are seen, that are observed, that are witnessed, those objects can be turned into subjects to talk about. Because sometimes the human corporeal body mind is seen as another separate body mind. Sometimes it is the object as a body mind, 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around some other body mind. Or it can become, by the manner by which it is envisioned, or it is seen, it is witnessed, it is observed, it can also be a subject to talk about. The subjectivity of its terminal uniqueness, the subjectivity of its permanence, that it believes it is alive. I'm permanently alive right now. I know I will die one day, but I'm planning for my future because I'm trying to become a better person than I was in the past. I made mistakes and I learned from my mistakes, and so that's what life means to me. So, body, mind, action figures get together and they conjure these ideas, these spiritual beliefs and religions, that there's a meaning, reason, and purpose for the human corporeal form to be endowed with particular abilities. So it comes up with the idea that if I can think for myself, if I can think 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around myself, if I'm doing that of my own accord of volition, via my own free will and choice, then that's how I justify that I'm separate from you, and you're separate from me, and you have your own unique way of being. Yeah? You have your own unique way of existing, of living your life. This is belief. See, this is agreed. In this societal structure that's called a society, yeah, there are billions of terminally unique self-conjured selves with their own birth name and birthright. They each have birth certificate. Now, this is referring to the societal structure that's on this economically viable grid. This grid system of barter, of sharing goods and services, yes. And there's certain skill sets that a human corporeal body, mind, action figure can learn and focus on learning a particular field of study, some kind of specialty, some kind of skill set. That was learned. Sure it was. And it was thought to be for its own good. And it seems to be that way. It really does seem to be that way based on maintaining a particular lifestyle. And that lifestyle that body, mind, action figure is supporting is based on its proficiency. Its proficiency of maintaining a particular skill set, and that it can go and attend and perform well enough to be accepted to come back the next day, that is on that work schedule it's given. It's given a work schedule. Can you follow the work schedule? Can you come to work on time? Can you be proficient at what you're doing? We will provide you the materials and the skills and the knowledge. We will give you the knowledge base to improve. If you want to seek some other skill set within the company, then we'll provide that for you. A stepping stone, or a rung in a ladder to climb, the next level, or let's say a different department other than the department you might be working in upon. Let's say it's some kind of corporation, and the corporation is laid out similar to, let's say, like a contact center. Let's say the field of study, or let's say that the commodity or the product happens to be some type of insurance, and there's so many different types of insurances. Therefore, since there are different types of insurance, there's pet, there's home, there's wedding, pet, home, wedding, car, auto insurance. So these are all different types of auto insurances, and within the contact center that's set up as that company or corporation that's representing that insurance company, or it's an insurance company that takes in a bunch of other smaller insurance companies and then supports them all with groups of body mind action figures that become office workers. So there's all these see, all of these subjects that we're referring to, it provides meaning, reason, and purpose, 2x4, from, about, with, upon, and around an individual person that believes that they are just a self, but that's not conjured. They are a real permanent self. And yes, they have to accept it because it seems to be an inevitability. What's inevitable? Well, death is inevitable. Taxes are inevitable because the taxes support the economical viability of the structure, of the societal structure. The economy is very, very critical, 2x4, from, about, with, upon, and around the groups of cells that can group together and make that work, make that process happen. As machinery, they are sprockets, so to speak, in a giant watch. And if that sprocket's not turning, and it's not turning as it properly as it should in a particular way, then it's going to cause the other sprockets to be withheld, and that piece is going to have to be taken out because it's not functioning properly. Oh, that's one of innumerable, many other examples of a euphemism or a metaphor to use as an example. Examples of what seemingly seems to be going on or happening in the world. Now, not only apparently appears to be separate happenings happening, not just one inseparable reality or happening throughout the infinite universe, which is the way it truly, seemingly is. Once that's recognized, but not recognized 2x4, from, about, with, upon, and around a particular body mind action figure. Once it is recognized that it's applicable throughout the infinite universe, what's applicable throughout the infinite universe? That which is everything and no thing, inseparably so and not so. That is it right there. That's the one. But nothing else added to that. No other ideas. 2x4, from, about, with, upon, and around a body mind that can entertain other ideas other than the absolute, but it cannot know it. It can never know absolutely everything and nothing that's inseparably so, not so. It can never know that. But it will continue to try to seek that because it thinks, if I can come up with even some statements, even some ideas, even taking non-duality and using non-duality, turning it into a philosophy, and then taking non-duality and just dissecting it and seeing how it all works, just taking each of the statements from Zen and all these other so-called spiritual teachings. They turn, there's these words that that are identifiers of certain types of teachings and learnings, and they're called something. They're given entitlements. That which can be known is given an entitlement. That which is seen as though it is something separate needs to be identified. It needs to be labeled and categorized. That's what the self believes. And it is stated in this way just to simply come up with this terminology and come up with this entitlement regarding a body, mind, action figure and calling that a conjured self, and that conjured self has conjured its own individuality and its terminal uniqueness. It has conjured it the conjuring originated from learning. And what did it originate from learning? The very first time that innocence was imposed upon. The innocence of a body mind that was simply existing in peace, but it was existing with the absolute. It always will. It always has. But the conjuring ideas of individuality and terminal uniqueness, separateness, and the separation, the idea of identification. It was not an intentional thing to say that, okay, we're just going to come up with one day, coming up with this idea and saying, okay, that person's male and that person's female, and this is what constitutes a female body mind, this is what constitutes a male body mind. And so gender, all these dualities, this is this way, that is that way. This can be a little bit more this way, and that can be more a little bit that way, to various degrees. But what appears to be, let's call it something. Let's call what appears to be, let's say, male. How is it male? Well, it appears a particular way with male attributes, characteristics. And so these identifiers were conjured. And there's so many different ways to speak of how it all began. Right around 18 months, when what's referred to as innocence. Innocence is innocence is seemingly held by a human corporeal body mind that is not filled with knowings and doings yet. It is simply being. It's just focusing on just simply being. It's happy with being. So it's at play. It plays. It likes to run outside. It likes to play with toys. It likes those type of activities because it believes. It's not even believing yet. It's just being. It's being happy. It doesn't believe it's happy. It doesn't think about how it's being happy. But in that innocence and that pure innocence of happiness, just being. Without question, being without question. That's been referred to as the innocence of a child. And a lot of the religions even say that. Returning back to that. In other words, in order to enter the kingdom, that body, mind, action figure must be as that which sees reality or the infinite universe as through the eyes of a child, and through the eyes of a child that was considered to be innocence, pure innocence of just beingness, just being, without knowing, without the idea that I will have to be a particular way. No, just a natural way with the flow of the absolute. And the flow of the absolute is what? Simply everything and nothing, apparently so and not so. Actually, everything and nothing inseparably, so and not so. Not the apparent part, because the apparent part is just the appearances of what had been thought to be things. The collapsing continues. Yes, there can be a collapse. And that would be the collapse that there was once an individual, self-conjured self, that was really existing. They were really existing separate from everybody and everything else, when that was never the case. It was just conjured. All of that was conjured. Hence why this body, mind, action figure has taken on this non-duality, non-dualism, the Advaita Vedanta. It's been called simply pointing to not to teach it. It's not even a knowing. It's just a recognition, just as being the seen. Being the seen doesn't require knowing that there's beingness, and doesn't require doing the beingness. So the being the seen is at the, so to speak, is at the core of the Absolute. It's at the core of it, it's with it. It's with the Absolute. It always has been with the Absolute. It never left it. So that which is referred to as innocent, as the innocence of a child, is the Absolute expressing both that which is observable and unobservable, real and unreal, knowable and unknowable. It is everything, no thinking, and no thing, everythinging. Everything and nothing inseparably so, not so. And just in those few statements right there, that's it. That's it. It is not this. It is not this. Always all. Right?
Nothing to get at all.
On pourrait dire il n'y a rien à obtenir du tout.
So what happens, what apparently happens,
Donc ce qui se produit en apparence,
is just naturally whole.
c'est juste naturellement entier.
It's just this.
C'est juste ça.
There is no higher thing to find.
Il n'y a pas de choses plus hautes à trouver.
And there is no higher state to reach.
Il n'y a pas d'état plus haut à atteindre.
Because basically this is what's seen as a dream, or what we regard as a dream, so to speak.
Parce qu'en gros, c'est ça qui est vu comme étant un rêve.
Would be the sense to be something that's separate.
C'est la sensation d'être quelque chose qui est différent.
And what's being said here is that that's a complete illusion.
Ce qui est dit ici, c'est que ça, c'est complètement une illusion.
But it's not an illusion that someone can escape from.
Mais c'est pas une illusion que quelqu'un peut échapper.
Or it's not an illusion that someone can awaken from.
C'est pas une illusion que quelqu'un peut.
And that illusion that is spoken of via this particular body, mind, action figure with the birth name and birthright of Andreas Mueller is referring to illusion. The illusion is the conjuring. The illusion is a reality. It's thought to be a shared reality. Yet it is a self-conjured dream or an interpretation that there's a separate reality around us as groups of individual human corporeal body mind action figures that have their own birth names and birthrights, and they have their own bodies and minds to use as they will, via a free will and choice, accord volition, to live out their own life the way they choose to live it. And that there is some degree of control in that, in the manner by which life is lived. Life is thought to be lived to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around a self-conscious self that conjures the idea that is permanently so, that's the way everything is. Everything is separate, and that there's separate things around a separate person. So there's plenty to do and plenty to know. There's always something else that can be learned and turn that into a knowing. And there's always something to do about that which a body, mind, action figure that refers to it as a self-conscious self, as an individual person, believes that their life is filled with doings and knowings, and overlooking the simplicity of being. just simply inherently on being a scene, an energy form that happens to be referred to as humanly corporeal, and referred to as humanly corporeal in various languages, but that does not make that idea permanently so just because it can be expressed via a conjured language. Languages are indeed conjured, as everything else is conjured to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around the self-conjured conjured self as an individual entity or individual person. That is not what we are. We are not that. We are simply blending, coalescing, mixing, immersed at all times, in all spaces and all times. But it was, but in, upon, to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around that which is referred to as a planet, and a planet that, although it too is impermanent, it's seemingly more permanent to the extent that it apparently appears to be spending more time in that which is referred to as permanence. And in a duration of time that is thought to be duration, as a sequence of events, of a course of everything appearing to happen in space and time, although everything apparently appears to be happening, and the happenings are the combinations or the empty fullness of absolutely everything, as everything apparently appears to be collections of things and a scenery of that which appears as though the appearance of everything is a happening, that everything is happening all at once, and everything continues to happen, and that moments that are considered seconds are always new, renewed, reboot, so to speak, renew, different. Every moment, every second that goes by is different than the previous. And the different previous second that went by of absolutely everything appearing was different than the one before. And there's this idea as though everything and no thing that is inseparably so and not so is thought to be appearing as though it's a process of finiteness. That there's a threefold principle of past, a present, and future. And it is thought that way because a group of self-conjured selves have agreed that it's a particular way through what is referred to as the sciences. And that the sciences are describing that which is considered finite. And the finiteness of the finite universe is measured. And that the so-called and so-named astrophysicist is going to come up and conjure explanations and equations and different types of symbolic representations and graphs and diagrams and characters and a type of a language the sciences are is considered a particular type of knowledge base, and the knowledge base of the sciences is explaining that which is believed to be finite, and that the finite universe is measurable, and that the problem is trying to come up with a symbol that represents that finiteness, and that there is no foreverness or infinity, that there is a barrier, that there are parameters to everything, and everything appears as an energetic movement for a particular duration in space and time, although that which is appearing and manifesting in space and time is temporally temporary, because it's not permanently so. It is both permanently so as it appears as an energy form of some type, or some particular frequency that's not any particular frequency of its own recorded volition, but it is appearing along with absolutely everything. That is, everything and no particular thing that stands alone. That is inseparably so, and not so, simultaneously, separately so, and not separately so. It's inseparable. There is no separation. There isn't anything that exists separate of its own accord volition. It just simply appears that way as a finiteness. Therefore, it could be stated that the infinite universe is finiteness appearing as everything. And that which is considered nothing or no thing is out of nowhere and from nothing. 2 by 4 from, about, with, upon, and around nothing. So in space and time, manifestation appears as something that's identified, as something that can be identified, but that which is identified is not singled out as something separate. It is described as though it is something separate, but that which is considered something separate is immeasurable in its countenance. So that which is identified as something in particular cannot be singled out as something that stands alone as something particular, because the countenance of anything in particular is not just one separate thing. There is no separation. Absolutely everything and nothing is inseparably so and not so. Everything that appears as though it is something and is referred to as something in particular is temporarily appearing as that something is identified. 2 by 4 from, about, with, upon, and around that which believes it is a separate entity that can express in the manner by which it expresses. Although it is expressing, it believes it's expressing as an independent being or an independent human corporeal body, mind, action figure that's independently so, and that had a beginning will have an end, and that its life is its own story, and that its story is about itself because it has lived a life of its own, making choices throughout its life, instead of the other way around, where life makes all the choices 2 by 4 from, about, with, upon, and around that which believes it's making choices of its own accord and volition when it's not. Nobody, mind, action figure needs to do anything in particular or needs to know about anything in particular. All body, mind, action figures do not need to know 2 by 4 from, about, with, upon, and around itself, because it's not existing 2 by 4 from, about, with, upon, and around itself. It only apparently appears that way. Apparently appears that way because the indeterminate duration in space and time is limited. It's brief. It is brief. The manner by which a human corporeal body, mind, action figure is going to appear visibly observable in mirrors for only a temporary, indeterminate duration within the impermanence in space and time, and not of space and time. The impermanence is the illusion. Impermanence is the illusion that I am here and I am existing and I live my own life and I have my own body and mind, my own free will and choice to do with what I please with this body mind that is believed to exist, possessing and having its own life. It is convinced of that. It believes that wholeheartedly. It believes only in permanence, and then when there's no longer the presence of permanence, whereby the impermanence is describing death, but that cannot be known because that's unobservable. It's unreal. It's unknowable. And so there it is. There's that which is knowable, and there's that which is unknowable. There's that which is observable, and there's that which is unobservable. There's that which is real, and there's that which is unreal. But it is all of that, and more. It is everything else. It is all of it. It's always always. So everything and no thing cannot be segregated and placed into various categories and then separate certain visual fields as though there's objects within those visual fields, that there are separate things within it and what is seen. There is no separation that way. The body-mind action figure just believes that because it's conjured that. It has taken the cognizance or the conscious contact points of 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around that which is a functional body mind that has various functions, and that it has conscious contact points, and those conscious contact points are thought to be independent ones of that body mind, of that particular body mind action figure that believes that. It believes and conjures the idea that, okay, since I could think, that must mean that I am. So it finds meaning, reason, and purpose in doings and knowings. So it conjures doings and knowings to justify meaning, reason, and purpose when there is no need for meaning, reason, and purpose. There's no need for meaning, reason, purpose 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around nobody. Nobody is required to conjure meaning, reason, purpose regarding doings that it believes in and thinks that it needs to do, actions it needs to take, and then knowledge, a knowledge base about its very own existence that is believed to be in an independent existence. Therefore it conjures the idea, I think, therefore I am. I can do things of my own accord and volition. I can decide to do things 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around myself. But that's the conjured idea, that is so. But that is not so in that particular way. That is thought about, that is believed to be. It is not being that. It does not need to do its being missing. It does not need to know about that because it's already with the Absolute. Everything is already set up. It always has been, and it always will be complete, whole, and perfect just as it is. So for a body-mind action figure to turn around and say that, no, I know what I'm talking about. I have learned what I speak of. I have thoroughly examined. I have sought all my life to know what I know. See, it has believed that. It has convinced itself. Subconscious still believes that what it knows of its own accord and volition, its own free will. It chose its own knowledge base that it believes it has to use. It believes that knowledge is useful. That knowledge is useful to become better than what it was in the past. It believes that there was a past and that it had a beginning and it was just starting to develop. It was just beginning because that was its own beginning. It believes that when it was born, that was its own beginning. And then it began to put together its own story. And it has its own story to tell because it believes that the story it tells is 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around itself as not only the narrator of its own story, but also the persona, the personality characteristics, personality traits that are very unique, that it believes it has its own personality traits and characteristics and very unique features 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around itself. And these features, these characteristics, these personality traits, those stem from a particular birth name and birthright. This is why the birth name is something evidential to use as a personal identifier 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around an individual subconscious stuff that believes it is separate from everybody and everything else, and that is very unique and special in some particular way. And that it could come up with all these particular ways that it is eternally unique and very, very special, and independently so, and separate from everybody and everything else. So that's just conjured. All of it is conjured. And also, in a sense, that which is the absolute conjures finiteness. The absolute is infinitudinal complexification. The absolute is infinity expressed via finiteness. Infinity is unknowable. Finiteness is knowable to the extent that that finiteness is described. Finiteness is described because it's believed to be something temporarily so, whilst there's a body-mind action figure that can conjure the idea that it is, and it can identify with its temporal temporariness to admit to that, and once it collapses as terminal uniqueness, once it collapses the idea of being separate from everybody and everything else, once it collapses the idea, what is revealed is that it has always been with the absolute all along, and that all these ideas that it conjured 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around itself are not so. They're not exclusively the way that they were thought to be and learned. Everything 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around a separate human corporeal body-mind action figure that believes it is separate from everybody and everything else, it is believed that it was existing and living in a particular way based on its own accord volition and its own free will and choice to live its own life. It did not accept or could not understand and know that life is appearing through all manifestations of that which appears as the appearances of manifestations. Always, always, all ways that appear as everything appears. But nothing is appearing of its own accord and volition. It's all tethered, it's all immersed, it's mixed, it's a mixture, it's coalescing, it's blending as energetic movements of manifestations, but they're continuously cycling, changing, appearing, disappearing, and reappearing. And it's just a constant appearance of that cycle as finiteness. The infinitudinal complexification as everything and nothing that is separately so and not so is appearing via the infinitudinal complexification of the absolute as finiteness. As though there are parameters, as though there are boundaries, as though there are individual energetic movements that are independent of their own accord volition, but they're not. They can appear as though they're organized briefly in space and time, temporarily so, but only temporarily, as something temporarily appearing. And in that temporariness, it is impermanent. Absolutely everything that appears manifesting as some type of energetic movement, some type of energetic form, is temporarily so. And it is not so. Simply because the absolute is everything and no thing, inseparably so and not so. Everything and nothing is not exclusively so. It is both so and not so. It doesn't leave out the not so-ness of the absolute. The not so-ness is unobservable, it's unreal and unknowable. Then there's that which appears and manifests. There's that which is observable, real, and knowable. But that's only temporarily, visibly observable in space and time. For no meaning, reason, purpose. There never was a meaning, reason, purpose for absolutely anything to appear. And for the absolute to appear as absolutely everything. So everything is of its own accord and volition anyway. Because the absolute is appearing, is absolutely everything appears. But not as an exclusive something, and not as an exclusive no-thing. So there is what appears to be a paradox. the paradox appears out of the finiteness that stems from the origins of the absolute, that is infinitudinal complexification. That's infinitely so and not so. So therefore, absolutely everything and nothing is infinitely so and not so. It has never been a particular way. It is always all ways. All ways that are knowable and unknowable. All ways that are temporally temporary and impermanent. Or impermanent and appearing as though they're permanently so, but they're only temporally temporary so. That which appears as though it's permanently so is simply temporally temporarily that way. And that, when we say that way, it's in space and time. And at the same time, it's not of space and time. So everything is appearing out of nowhere from nothing. And then after it appears for a while, for an indeterminate duration in space and time, then it disappears back to nothing, from nowhere. Therefore, human corporeal body, mind, action figures, and all other life forms that are considered life forms, that are thought to be life forms, that are labeled as such, labeled as various types of species of life forms, and the different kingdoms, the insect kingdom, the microbial, all the way from the microcosmic world, or realm, or universe, all the way to the macrocosmic, that's of space, of planetary bodies and stars and suns, and that which is attributed to astronomy, or that which is considered to be astronomical. So, does anything need to be singled out and referred to as permanently so, and then since it is, there's significance behind that? This is why there is no meaning, reason, purpose about absolutely anything. Nothing is exclusively so. Nothing is terminally unique. Nothing is uniquely so and independently so of its own accord and volition. No such thing. There's nothing that way. Because although it's appearing in some particular way, it's only temporally temporary. That's the impermanence of that which appears as though it's something, but it will not always be making appearances. It's not making appearances of its own accord and volition. It's just simply part of the absolute that expresses in some particular way. It appears as though it's expressing some particular way, but there are innumerable ways for the absolute to express as however it's going to express. So however it appears to be, it is that, and it is not that. It is not this particular way or that particular way or some other particular way. No particulars, no exclusivities. Nothing is separate.
Laquelle quelqu'un peut s'éveiller.
Because exactly that's someone, so to speak, who wants to awaken or escape,
C'est exactement ce quelqu'un qui veut s'éveiller ou s'échapper,
does not exist.
qui n'existe pas.
And everything that that assumed person wants to reach or gain,
Et tout ce que cette personne supposée veut atteindre ou obtenir,
namely to awaken or to leave the illusion,
de s'éveiller ou de quitter l'illusion,
does not exist.
ça n'existe pas.
There is no one.
Il n'y a personne.
In that sense, every teaching, everything that tells you or me or anyone what to do,
Donc dans ce sens, tout enseignement, tout ce qui dit à quelqu'un, toi ou moi, quoi faire,
would just be part of that illusion.
serait juste une partie de cette illusion.
There is no one,
Il n'y a personne,
and there is no path,
il n'y a pas de chemin,
and there's nothing to gain from anything or anywhere.
il n'y a rien à obtenir de quoi que ce soit ou de qui que ce soit.
In that sense, this is not a teaching.
Dans ce sens, ça, c'est pas un enseignement.
I can't guide the right path towards holiness,
Je ne peux pas guider sur le bon chemin vers l'entièreté.
because the separation from holiness does not exist.
Parce que la séparation de l'entièreté n'existe pas.
There is no separation whatsoever Therefore, that which the self-conjures is not permanently so. It is not so in the manner by which it is cognized, in the manner by which it is conjured. This is how and why there is nobody that exists separately of their own accord and volition, of their own free will and choice. They do not exist of their own accord and volition. Although it apparently appears to be a body-mind that's appearing, it's simply expressing as one of innumerable other ways that the Absolute expresses. So since there is no separation and everything and nothing is inseparably so and not so, and that's a representation of the Absolute, that means entirely anything that could ever be thought to be something that's uniquely so is not just how and the manner by which it is expressed or is identified to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around somebody. It is not that way exclusively, that in that way that is thought to be so. In other words, identified. If there's a body-mind action figure that believes it is identifying something, then that is a perspective, and that is a viewpoint from a self-conjured self that believes it can have these perspectives as it observes what is thought to be something observed separately. There is a separate observer observing something, and that separate observer has a perspective to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around the perspective of something that it is observing. So none of it was ever so. None of it is permanently so. None of those ideas and thoughts and concepts and conjurings are permanently so. They're just temporarily so. And they're not so. They've always been not so. The conjuring of that which is not so it never does appear as though it is permanently so as something. It's all temporarily temporary. That which is temporally temporary is something appearing out of nothing, out of nowhere, for no apparent reason, meaning, and purpose, other than the accord and relation of the Absolute. It is the Absolute's accord and relation. And the Absolute can take on any form. It can take on the form of a deity, it can take on the form of any human corporeal form. It can express in one of innumerable ways. And just because it's expressing does not make that exclusively unique and uniquely so. Because absolutely everything is unique. Always and always. So uniqueness, to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around the Absolute, is based on the manner by which it's expressing. And it's not expressing to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around anybody in particular. Life is not about anybody. Life is not about some particular person. And it's not about a particular group of beings as well. Life is not to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around the human race. It's been referred to the human species, the human corporeal form, as it's referred to as the human race, as the human species. There are other life forms. They're not less significant than that which is referred to as the human species. There are the canines, there are the felines, those domesticated animals that we refer to as companions. These are references that are made to various life forms and various things that are thought to be separate things around that which believes it is separate from everybody and everything else, and that there isn't everything else, and within that everything else there are things that can be identified and pointed to. Non-duality Advaita Vedanta is pointing to that which is the Absolute, that is the everywhereness of everything, and nothing that's inseparably so and not so.
What this points to, so to speak,
Ce que ça indique, pour ainsi dire,
is that sitting in a room and what apparently happens
c'est que d'être assis dans une pièce et ce qui se passe en apparence
is everything,
est tout,
and it's naturally whole and complete.
et c'est naturellement entier et complet.
There is no need for any realization.
Il n'y a aucun besoin de réalisation.
There's nothing special to see
Il n'y a rien de spécial à voir
or to transcend
ou à transcender
or to get rid of.
ou à se débarrasser.
Just not there. All those things just don't exist.
C'est juste pas là. Toutes ces choses-là, elles n'existent pas.
In that sense,
Dans ce sens,
that's it.
c'est tout.
There's no teaching,
Il n'y a pas d'enseignement,
nothing to reach,
rien à atteindre,
nothing to gain,
rien à obtenir.
no one who needs advice,
Personne qui a besoin de conseils.
no one who could give advice.
Personne qui pourrait donner des conseils.
It's just this.
C'est juste ça.
And since everything is appearing as everything and no thing is inseparably so, not so, it is now expressed as that which is the absolute, as everything and no thing inseparably so, not so. Once that which is expressing and no longer expressing 2x4 from about, with, upon, and around an appearance of a human corporeal body mind action figure. Once it is no longer expressing independent, is believed to be expressing independently so, it recognizes that it is not of space and time. It recognizes it's not of space and time, and that recognition is beyond the knowing that there is a single independent entity that was once living its own life. That was conjured. What was it conjured by? It was conjured 2x4 from, about, with, upon, and around a human corporeal body mind that believed that. It believed that it was independently so when it was not. It had learned. It had learned that. It thought that what it was learning was true. It thought that what it learned regarding its own terminal uniqueness, and not so much terminal, but its uniqueness. Could be terminal, it could be mild uniqueness, could be terminal uniqueness, could be mediocre uniqueness, it could be any type of uniqueness. But that uniqueness was once thought to be something separate and independently so, of its own accord and volition, that particular body mind action figure took aboard these thoughts and ideas, entertained them in the mind of that particular body mind action figure, and that particular body mind action figure appeared in a particular way, and just because it appeared in a particular way did not make that separate. It just apparently appears to be separate, but it's still part of the whole. It's still part of absolutely everything and nothing, and separately so and not so. So absolutely anything that can be identified and thought to be as though it's something in particular is still part of absolutely everything. It's still part of the absolute. And again, the absolute is always all ways. All ways that are knowable and all ways that are unknowable. It's both knowable and unknowable. All ways that are observable and those ways that are unobservable. All ways that are apparently appearing real and all those ways that are unreal. And so the completeness, the wholeness, and the perfection as the absolute is appearing as absolutely everything and nothing appears of its own accord and volition ad infinitum. It's always been that way, always will be that way. It hasn't been always in a particular way that a body mind action figure believes or thinks that the absolute is. The absolute is unknowable in that sense that it cannot be categorized, it cannot be defined, it cannot be something that is final. It is infinite. It is not finite. The absolute includes absolutely everything. Absolutely everything in all ways. When we say always, and when we say, whenever a human corporeal body mind action figure is expressing in this way, in this manner, via non-dualism, via non-duality, via the Advaitins, it is pointing. And when it says it's pointing, it cannot miss pointing to the absolute, because the absolute is everywhere. So wherever it points, that's it. But it's not a separate somewhere. It's not a separate realm or or dimension. And there are no other dimensions to reach. That was conjured. And it was a very strong conjuring, whilst the body, mind, action figure, as a self-conjured conjured self, was self-conjuring the idea that it needed to seek. It needed to seek that which it thought would provide its ability to become greater than it thought it was before. To become something, the idea of becoming something uniquely special, and to improve on something that is believed to be something that can be improved, is not so. Nothing is existing as though it needs to be improved upon. Everything is already whole, complete, and perfect. It does not need to become anything else, other than however it appears. And however it appears is not appearing as though it's a particular something. These ideas of separation stem from this learning that a body, mind, action figure was independently existing of its own accord and volition. And as it continues to collapse, that recognition as the absolute that is appearing as absolutely everything and no thing. The clarity of that is unquestionably and undeniably so and not so. It is unquestionable that the absolute is absolutely everything and nothing, and separately so and not so. And it's always been that way. Now, it hasn't been that way to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around any particular person or any group of people, or for any group of entities. It is to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around absolutely all life forms that appear and continue to appear in one of innumerable ways. Countless is immeasurable as the absolute appears as absolutely everything. But it does not need to be known. It does not need to be figured out. It does not need to be stated. It does not need to be placed into some kind of spiritual teaching, a teaching of something that which is considered spiritual. That which is considered spiritual is thought to be a state of spirituality that a body-mind can reach. A body-mind believes that, I'm becoming more than I was before, although I feel that although I can have the feeling of being permanent and permanently independent and unique and special, and that I can think about my own life and I can live my life a particular way, in this way of thinking, of self-identifying with myself, this belief makes sense. To, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around that particular self-conscious self that thinks in that way, that thinks in terms of improving upon itself, that believes it could do that. See, there's to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around. All these pronouns are attributed to separateness, are attributed to self-identification, to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around the self-conscious self that believes in its own independence, its own separateness, its own terminal uniqueness. Its own uniqueness, terminally unique, especially unique, specifically unique in some way, unique in a sense that the uniqueness is attributed to that which a particular body, mind, action figure has done in its doings and based on its knowledge base, that it knows, that it possesses special knowledge of higher learning, and that it's improving upon itself. It's reaching for more information to increase its knowledge base, to increase what it believes it knows. And the more that it knows, it believes it's becoming more than it was before. There was no before, there is no after, there is no future, there was no past, there's only the nowness, the nownessing. The absolute is always now. It never was in the past. It can appear as the past, and memory can be retrieved, or memory can be accessed to, by, for, from, about, with, upon, and around that which believes it had its own past, and it believes in the story that it had. But it drops all of that in the collapse. The collapse, as it collapses and withdraws from all these unreal conjurings, and they were. They were never real. They were never substantial. They did not exist upon some particular coordinate in space and time, and there is no database that a body-mind action figure can go and visit somewhere throughout the infinite universe, some kind of library, and there's no akashic records, and all of those fanciful ways of thinking, all these conjurings, were conjured 2x4 from about, with, upon, and around that which it believed it was so unique that it was continuing to become a greater type of being, a very unique special being, such as the conjuring of the idea of supernal beings, that there are separate supernal beings referred to as angels, and that they had these great tasks to do, and that they were tied in with nature, and that it was much greater than the human corporeal beings, and that one day the human corporeal being can be just as special and unique as an angelic supernal being. And so the idea was conjured through religious beliefs, spiritual teachings that were also conjured, that there's all these other types of beings, and although it may actually be that it's part of the countenance that's immeasurable, there could be human corporeal types of beings that have all types of different abilities, but that does not single them out as exclusively the greatest beings throughout the infinite universe. There are no singled out great beings. There are groups of beings with various apparent appearances of capabilities, just as we see as a very crude example with the canines, their ability to smell, one of those five senses, or one of those conscious contact points that even the animal kingdom possesses. But it appears in a different way. And these differences, these different ways, is part of absolutely everything that's always all ways. It's in so many different ways that the countenance is immeasurable in how those ways are appearing. So everything's appearing in some particular way, but it's not appearing of its own accord of volition in some particular way. It is simply included. It is simply included with absolutely everything that is both so and not so, that is inseparably so and not so.
One could say so, yes. Seen from the person, this would be the only experienced reality.
On peut le dire comme ça, ouais, que vu par la personne, ce serait la seule réalité vécue.
I'm treated bad and there is another person who's really wrong.
Je suis maltraité, il y a une autre personne
Duality.
qui est vraiment tort.
Of course, that completely drops.
Bien sûr, ça s'effondre complètement.
But one could say what apparently happens is that this